Hello, everyone. My name is Rose, and I want to share my story with you. My mother-in-law, Sherry, wasn't always the vain, materialistic woman she seems to be today, or at least, that's how my husband, Dylan, remembers her. He believes this change came much later in her life. Sherry and Dylan shared a modest life when he was growing up. After losing her husband when Dylan was just 4, Sherry worked tirelessly to provide for them. Life was simple, but she made sure Dylan had everything he needed. Things began to change when Dylan, who had always been determined and hardworking, graduated from college and landed a well-paying job. Dylan is not only a talented and compassionate doctor but also a humble and generous man, one of the many reasons I fell in love with him. He earned a full scholarship to medical school, which helped him secure the life he has now. But as Dylan's success grew, Sherry's lifestyle shifted dramatically. When I first met Sherry, she had already developed a taste for luxury. Her initial reaction to me was anything but kind. As Dylan introduced me, she gave me a long, judgmental look and said, "Dylan, is this the girl you've been going on about? She's so plain and average. Why her? Does she even have a job?" For context, no, I don't have a traditional job, and I'll explain why later. However, Sherry quickly jumped to conclusions, assuming I was after Dylan's money. She labeled me a gold digger and treated me like a burden from the start. Dylan immediately came to my defense, but the argument escalated, leaving us no choice but to leave. On the way home, Dylan apologized profusely for his mother's behavior. "Rose," he said, "I'm sorry. My mom wasn't always like this. I don't know what's gotten into her, but I promise I won't let her keep treating you this way." His words were comforting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my relationship with Sherry would always be strained. She's the only family Dylan has left, and cutting her off completely wasn't something I wanted to encourage. "I won't force you to be friends with her," Dylan said gently, "but can you at least try to be civil?" "I'll do my best," I replied. "But Dylan, I can't promise she'll ever respect me. If she crosses the line again, we'll deal with it," he assured me. "I love my mom, but I love you too. You come first." Despite Dylan's promises, I remained uneasy. Sherry didn't seem like the type of person to change her mind about me, and I wasn't sure how much patience I could muster. 3 years into our relationship, Dylan and I got married. It was a small court wedding due to financial constraints. Dylan had been sending a significant portion of his earnings to Sherry every month for emergencies, and even after we married, he continued to do so. I never stopped him. I understood his desire to support his mother, but it often left us strapped for cash. Unfortunately, Sherry became more of a challenge over time. She made a habit of gossiping about me, telling her friends that I was a gold digger and unworthy of her son. At first, I tried to ignore it, but her behavior began to affect my reputation and weigh on me emotionally. Dylan confronted her multiple times, but her opinion of me never wavered. In her eyes, I would never be good enough for her son. Surprisingly, one day Dylan told me his mom wanted to invite me to a small party she was hosting. I was skeptical. Sherry had always made her dislike for me clear. Still, Dylan assured me she had promised to improve and genuinely wanted me there. It seemed out of character, especially considering her recent financial struggles, but Dylan believed she had somehow managed to pull it off. Reluctantly, I agreed to go, hoping this could be a step toward mending our relationship. I wanted to believe she was making an effort, and for Dylan's sake, I decided to keep an open mind. Deep down, I had my doubts. Sherry had never shown any real interest in repairing our relationship. I knew she didn't respect me, and I questioned whether she even cared about Dylan's happiness. Still, I told myself that I needed to give her a chance. Maybe this party would be an opportunity to start fresh. The next day, I waited for Sherry to send me the details. When I finally got a text from her, I assumed it was the official invitation, but as I read her message, my optimism quickly faded. She began by enthusiastically describing the party, a lavish affair at a five-star hotel that everyone had been buzzing about. She boasted about her plans to treat 15 of her friends to an unforgettable evening. Intrigued, I asked if I was included, especially since Dylan had assured me she wanted me there. Her response caught me off guard. It wasn't the kind invitation I'd expected. Instead, her tone was dripping with arrogance and disdain. She wrote, "Oh, Rose, dear, I don't think you'd enjoy an event like this. It's meant for people who appreciate a certain level of sophistication. But don't worry, I'm sure Dylan will take you somewhere nice sometime." I stared at my phone, stunned. Her words weren't just dismissive. They were a clear attempt to put me in my place. Sherry hadn't changed at all. If anything, this invitation had been another excuse to belittle me and make it clear that, in her eyes, I didn't belong in her world. It became painfully clear that I wasn't invited to Sherry's party. She emphasized the exclusivity of the event, bragging about her wealth, social standing, and the classiness of her guests. I was baffled, especially since Dylan had genuinely believed she was extending an olive branch. When I mentioned my assumption, Sherry's response was dripping with condescension. She claimed I wouldn't grasp the complexities of organizing such an event and dismissed me outright. Determined to hold on to my dignity, I simply acknowledged her message and made it clear I wouldn't attend where I wasn't wanted. Sherry didn't miss the opportunity to reinforce her supposed superiority, doubling down on her remarks about her class and status. Though I was deeply hurt and tempted to lash out, I chose restraint. I decided not to tell Dylan, not wanting to create unnecessary tension. Instead, I waited quietly for the day of the party. When the day arrived, Sherry, oblivious to the hurt she'd caused, posted pictures on social media flaunting her gathering. She and her friends posed in designer outfits, basking in their perceived grandeur. I ignored it, focusing on my work and biding my time. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. It was my dad calling. And here's a little secret about my life. My father owns the very hotel where Sherry was hosting her party. Sherry had no idea. 3 years ago, I inherited a significant sum from my grandfather, which I invested in my dad's business. The profits from his ventures, including the hotel, have made me financially comfortable. However, I've always kept this private, preferring not to flaunt my background, something Sherry was blissfully unaware of. My dad explained that Sherry and her friends had racked up an enormous bill of $2,000 by ordering recklessly, oblivious to the prices. To make matters worse, she was now demanding a 50% discount, claiming she couldn't pay the full amount. As my dad described it, her group had been rude and entitled, upsetting the hotel staff throughout the evening. The irony hit me hard. This was the same party Sherry had used to mock me, yet she couldn't even afford it. When my dad asked how I wanted to handle the situation, I couldn't help but chuckle. I explained how Sherry had boasted about the event to insult me and suggested a fitting consequence. "Make them wash the dishes," I said with a grin. "Have them clean the kitchen and mop the floors, too. Let her friends join in, especially if they treated your staff poorly. And if she causes any trouble, don't hesitate to call the cops." My dad burst into laughter, loving the idea. He assured me he'd handle it and promised to share some photos of the aftermath. It felt like poetic justice, a moment of sweet revenge served cold. It felt like the perfect opportunity to turn the tables on Sherry and teach her a much-needed lesson in humility and respect. My dad assured me he would follow through with my suggestion, and we ended the call. About an hour later, my phone buzzed with a message from my dad. He'd sent pictures of Sherry and her friends scrubbing dishes and mopping the floors in the restaurant. To my amusement, Dad also shared that when Sherry finally recognized him as the owner, she looked visibly relieved. She tried to play it off, claiming she knew the owner and expected him to intervene and let her off the hook. But Dad wasn't having it. He calmly told her to keep cleaning. When she started to protest, he cut her off, saying, "Since you don't consider my daughter family, I don't consider you family either." I couldn't help but laugh. It was such a sweet moment of poetic justice, though part of me wished I could have been there to see it firsthand. I had to admit it felt good to know Sherry had finally gotten a taste of her own medicine. I was actually there and managed to snap some clear pictures of Sherry and her friends cleaning the restaurant. A while later, Dylan came home, looking visibly upset. It was obvious that Sherry had gotten to him first, and I could already imagine the twisted version of the events she'd shared. He walked right up to me, asking why my dad had made his mom clean the restaurant dishes. I took a deep breath and calmly explained the situation. I told him it was standard practice at the restaurant to handle such incidents this way. I walked him through the details, how Sherry had racked up a $2,000 bill, claimed she didn't have more than $1,000, harassed the staff, and caused chaos. I made it clear that I felt the punishment was fitting, given her behavior. Dylan was clearly taken aback and asked who Sherry had brought with her and what they'd ordered. I told him she had brought 15 people and ordered multiple high-end items. He looked even more shocked, explaining that Sherry had told him she was only taking 4 people and had invited me, but that I'd declined. I clarified the situation and showed him the text messages from Sherry. He then asked for the bill and pictures from the party to understand everything more clearly. My dad wasted no time sending him the receipts, and I forwarded the photos. Once Dylan saw the evidence, his anger was palpable. He immediately called Sherry to confront her. She tried to downplay the situation, claiming she had only mentioned being short on cash and accusing me of twisting the story to sabotage her. Dylan wasn't having it. He told her outright that she had declined my invitation, insulted me by calling me classless, and spent thousands on her friends while lying to him. Sherry tried to brush it off, calling it a harmless joke, but Dylan wasn't having any of it. His anger was growing as he processed the hypocrisy of her actions, especially considering how much she had relied on him financially. "I made a mistake giving you money every time you needed it," he said firmly. "But guess what? I'm not giving you any more money." Sherry pleaded. "But Dylan, you've been so supportive. You can't just stop now. It was a one-time mistake." Dylan cut her off, his voice cold and final. "No, Mom, this wasn't a one-time mistake. You've never treated my wife as family, and I'm done. If you can't respect her, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm not paying you to insult my wife while she sacrifices so much for us. This ends now." After Dylan hung up on Sherry, he blocked her number and apologized to me, genuinely remorseful for being upset without understanding the full story. I forgave him because, in the end, he stood up for me when it mattered most. We had a long, serious conversation about Sherry and came to the conclusion that, for the foreseeable future, she would no longer be a part of our lives. Over the next few days, Sherry's panic reached new heights as she realized that her actions might have permanently severed her relationship with Dylan. She started showing up at our house, demanding to speak with him, but each time, we turned her away. Sherry had been living off the financial support Dylan had provided, indulging in a luxurious lifestyle. Now that he had cut her off, she was forced to make drastic changes. She ended the lease on her expensive condo and moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment. Despite these changes, she continued to email us, minimizing her behavior and accusing us of overreacting. Meanwhile, Dylan channeled his energy into helping my dad expand his hotel business. They worked together on plans to open new hotels and restaurants in nearby cities. As for Sherry, she remains out of our lives for the time being. About a month ago, I found out I'm pregnant. Dylan and I are over the moon and busy making plans for the arrival of our little one. I'm relieved knowing that our child will be raised without the influence of shallow people like Sherry. If the time ever comes, I'll make sure she won't fill our child's head with her nonsense. For now, we're focused on preparing to become loving, devoted parents to a healthy and happy child. Wish us luck!